Hello and welcome to Rich Rides. This week I'm reviewing a 2015 Honda Vario 125 scooter. Firstly, let's cover the boring stuff. So this is a Honda Vario 125. As the name suggests, it's a 125 scooter. So 125cc's makes 11 horsepower, so pretty good for a 125 these days. The fuel figures are amazing. It's supposed to do 140 miles per gallon, which I do believe. As you can tell, I'm not in the UK here. This is Bali in Indonesia, and fuel is super cheap. The first time I went to fill this scooter up, it cost me less than £2 to fill the tank. It wasn't completely empty, but still, it's ridiculous, and 140 miles per gallon. So as I said, it's a scooter, a good old twist and go, so there's no gears. It's an automatic with the usual centrifugal type clutch. So control wise, your left hand just has your brake and your switch gear. So switch gear wise, there's not much. There's your lights, horn, indicators, and that's about it on your left. On your right, again, you've got a light switch to put daytime running lights or normal, and your electric start. So it's got an electric start, but interestingly, most stuff in the UK, if it's got electric start these days, you very rarely get a kickstart. Something I've noticed here is that most bikes still have a kickstart, and this is no exception. Of course, the other thing on your right hand side is your front brake, and this bike doesn't have ABS but has the combined braking system. One thing I did find interesting with the combined braking system is if you do squeeze one of the levers, once you get beyond a certain point you see the other lever physically move, so it definitely works. Talking of the brakes, then for what it is for a 125, they're pretty good. So they're not amazing, but they're adequate for the sorts of speeds you're doing. Something you get used to in Bali are dogs just wandering in front of you, as well as people and scooters and other traffic, but you soon get used to that. But yeah, the brakes, like I say, are adequate. Up front is a disc, it's just a single piston, fairly small diameter disc. At the rear is a good old trusty drum, but because it's a super light bike, I think it's something like 110 kilos, then they're perfectly adequate. Even if you have to sort of jam all on, then they work well. Next is the suspension. So it's got the usual sort of front shocks and forks, but fairly thin, fairly small. At the rear, it's just got a monoshock off to one side. What I find is the rear suspension's pretty good at soaking up the bumps. The front suspension, not so much. You can tell it's not the most expensive suspension, but these things are built to a budget. Still works, and especially on sort of smooth tarmac, then it rides really well and is super comfortable. But if you hit rough stuff, then it's not great, and like I say, especially the front. Sort of linked to the suspension is obviously the handling. So the caveat with this is that I'm not used to riding a scooter, so I find it fairly twitchy. That's probably to do with the small 14-inch wheels, and because of that then it doesn't inspire confidence to me. Okay, on to the practical stuff. So there's lots of storage on this, especially if you compare it to a motorbike with it being a scooter. So there's a big under-seat storage compartment. In there I can easily fit my full face helmet and a couple of other bits. And then in front of your knees you've got a couple of cubby holes, and it has a hook for hanging things on as well in front of your knees. So you quite often see people with bags hung from there, so it really adds to the carrying capacity. So how much does this scooter cost? Again, remember I'm in Bali, Indonesia, so completely different prices of things. This bike isn't actually available in the UK. It seems to be a sort of Asian market bike, and there's no real equivalent. But this is like a mid-range bike here, and the cost of this is just over £1,000 UK pounds, which is ridiculously cheap. You'd be looking to spend that for something 10 years old in the UK. So an absolute bargain. So combined with everything else about it, so the miles per gallon, parts, etc, etc, it's a super cheap bike. It's one of the most popular bikes out here too, and you can sort of see why. Although everything is that sort of price, so it must be a goodie. So let's do my usual 3 positives and any negatives about this bike. So 3 biggest positives. Number 1 is the cost. So super cheap to buy, super cheap to run, really good on fuel, really cheap servicing and parts. So yeah, so that's a big plus. Number 2 is just how easy it is to ride and to live with. So this has been my main transport for the last month, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that. And we've had to do supermarket runs. I've had my son on as a pillion most of the miles I've done here, and it's just done absolutely everything. It's not missed a beat, everything's well screwed together, and this particular bike, it's done I think 34,000 kilometres. It's only 5 years old, so effectively it's a hire bike, so it's probably not had the best life, but even so it still feels really solid, still in decent condition. Yes, things are like these plastics around the dashboard are quite worn, but here the temperature's 32 degrees virtually all year round. These bikes are just left out in the sun, so I'm not surprised that the plastics have faded slightly, and you can see there's a few scratches and things around the plastics as well. But yeah, considering the miles, then it just rides like a new bike. It's brilliant. My third big positive is how easy it is to ride. I reckon if anyone has ridden a bicycle, they could probably ride this scooter. It wouldn't take much to get used to it. Like I say, the whole twist and go thing is just so easy. Not worrying about gears. The brakes are nice and progressive and work well. Goes around corners okay, soaks up the bumps, it's comfortable. So yeah, it's great all round, but super easy as well. Now we're going a little bit quicker. It's reminded me that I didn't talk about the top speed when I talked about power. So apparently it has a top speed of about 110 k's. Here, as you can see, traffic is mad. There's no big wide open roads, so I've not got anywhere near that myself. It feels like there's plenty of go, loads of acceleration, so I've no reason to doubt that top speed. Okay, so I did the positives, now the negatives. I always try and do a balanced review, and even if there are any niggly things, I think it's worth mentioning. And that is the case with this bike as well. Then the positives far outweigh any negatives. The only couple of negatives I've got about it, the first one I mentioned before is that I think the suspension could be better. On rough stuff it's a bit crashy, could hopefully be improved. The only other negative, and I'm not sure whether this is because it's a scooter and I'm not used to scooters, I'm more used to motorbikes, and that's that although the mirrors are great, they don't vibrate or anything, they don't stick out very far. So my elbows are, well, you can sort of see there hopefully on the camera, but my elbows are always in the way. Like I say, fairly minor thing, probably to do with it being a scooter and have thin handlebars. It's something I'm not used to, and I do find it a bit annoying having to tuck my elbows in constantly to look behind me. So in summary, what do I think? I think this is a great little scooter. I can't see why you'd really need anything more. I think it'd be interesting to try one of the big sort of maxi scooters. I put a post on social media last week when I did the sort of 3 things that I love about scooters. Lots of people with big motorbikes said they also had scooters, and there were lots of love for things like the 650 Bergmans, so like I say, I think it'd be interesting to get hold of one of those. But yeah, in summary, a great bike for what it's designed for, then it just does the job brilliantly. So you can see it's nippy, it brakes well, it goes around corners, does everything you sort of need, and it's practical too. So that's it for this week. I hope you found that useful. As well as reviews like this, then I do some sort of how-tos, some product reviews, those kinds of things. So if you've liked this video or you've got any questions, please just leave a comment, ask any questions, do like it and subscribe to the channel too. Until next week, thanks a lot.